is about. It's a group that I know Colonel North can speak to the great care he's gotten in some of our military facilities, but we've also heard the horror stories of the VA. And not all of them are bad, but some of them are. And Wounded Warriors does a great job, to me, doing what we should be doing anyway. But you guys volunteer your money to support that project, and I know that we just got another plaque from them this year that was given to our listeners, and that's you guys, really, for the work you do on behalf of Wounded Warriors. And the other organization that we're honoring and helping tonight is the Valor Clinic Foundation, another nonprofit organization committed to improving access to and the quality of health care and shelter for veterans, two great organizations. So if you haven't given already, please do, and I thank you for that. I don't want him to stand any longer than he has to. You've seen his introduction in the book, you have it before you. Just without further ado, our true hero, Colonel Oliver North.
Retire the colors. Right, face. Forward, park. A round of applause for that civil air support. Thank you all very much. Bobby, thank you for the kind introduction. You're very generous, because I did not know that it was 14 in the copy that was sent to you, but it is now 16 and a half. I'll call you in April when the next one arrives. Right now it's 10 and 6, so I'm kind of in hog heaven with the boys that I've got, and the girls. The girls do know how to wrap Granddad right around that little finger. And many thanks to all of you for supporting those who defend our freedom. I just want you to know, please be assured that I did not intend to be here this evening wearing this stylish pantyhose and these high-speed double-barrel blasters that they gave me at Walter Reed. But when I returned from Kurdistan last Monday, a week ago, I checked into Walter Reed for an ingrown toenail, and when I woke up on Tuesday, the 240th anniversary of the Marines, while I was out, they decided to give me a whole new knee as a birthday present from a U.S. Army major who said, as he wrote on it, "Semper Fi Marine." So thanks to those skillful military doctors, and nurses, medics, and corpsmen. By the way, that's corpsmen, not corpsmen. And a physical therapist who is working on his master's degree in sadism. I'm with you here this evening. I'm especially glad for the work that you do with the Lehigh Valley Project 912, because supporting our vets and active duty military personnel and their families is something that means a lot to me personally. I've got a quarter century of personal experience with that, and the fact that you're doing it right here at home is very important. 25 years ago, on August 2nd, 1990, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. 5 days later, the very first U.S. forces arrived in Saudi Arabia. Lieutenant General Ed Bronars, who had graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy, a Republic of Korea and Vietnam war hero. He'd been my division commander. He was the man who cut my orders to the White House in 1981. He was a friend, still would be if he were still with us. He also headed my legal defense fund that my classmates started at the Naval Academy. Walked into my office at Guardian Technologies, the company I'd founded to make the armor that saved so many lives. Said, "We need to support our troops. We can't let what happened to those of us who served in Vietnam happen to these troops." In less than 3 weeks, Freedom Alliance was up and running as a 501c3, apparently because Lois Lerner was on summer vacation in our 501c3 application lot. I'm trying not to be political. But hell, I work for Fox News, so stand by. Our first efforts at supporting the troops was very simple. It was about 130,000 care packages, Christmas presents for families at home, and financial help for the families to meet their loved ones when they brought them back into Dover, Delaware on Angel flights. Back then, the government did not provide for the families to come to that. Since 9/11/01, there's been a whole raft of new needs. Troops who would have died in any other war are alive today. Long-term caregivers are at hospitals and they need support while they're there. There's no government provision for that. Track chairs for guys with multiple amputations. Hero hunts, hero family holidays, homes for heroes, hero scholarships. We just gave out our 6 millionth college scholarship, $6 million spent. We've got 304 youngsters on college scholarships right now who would not otherwise be able to go. And unfortunately, the new administration decided to stop funding Angel flights or payment for families to go to Dover for Angel flights, so we do that again. The caregiver support and the contact awards, we have no bureaucracy. We have all veterans or spouses of veterans or widows of veterans or offspring of veterans who run it. There are only 9 employees. Everything else is done by volunteers. The contact awards require only that a chaplain at a hospital call us and say, Lance Corporal Jones just arrived, his family has no means of getting there. And we cut an immediate check for $1,000 and tell the chaplain to get back in touch with us if they need more. Today, Freedom Alliance is all about what our troops call, and properly so, situational awareness. You see a need, you fill it, no fanfare, no chest thumping, no dancing in the end zone, just results. And that to me is what that institution that Lieutenant General Bronars, who's now passed, helped us begin 25 years ago this year. Not everyone has situational awareness. I've learned that. It's something that's very special among some Americans. I got inadvertently delayed by an airline that shall remain nameless, United. At the Indianapolis airport, I was flying back from San Diego. I'd been out there to Balboa Hospital to see some wounded guys that I'd covered. And we try to do that every trip I come back. I try to go visit the wounded guys or the families of those who were killed when I come back from overseas. And we're stranded in the airport. I don't know if you've ever been to the Indianapolis airport, but it's Concourse C, which is United's concourse, has about as many seats in it as you have right here. And there were about 4,000 people who've been diverted. Needless to say, there were not very many happy people in the airport. I'm wearing a baseball hat and sunglasses at 2 in the morning, looking for a place to plug in my cell phone. And I see one behind an older gentleman, and at 72, I can say he was older. And I looked behind him and I saw the plug and I said, "Excuse me, sir, can I plug in my cell phone there?" And he looked up at me and he said, "Sure, son. I know who you are." And I said, "Let's not start something in here tonight we can't finish." He said, "No, I read your book about World War II. Now, without any hubris, Bobby, I've written 3 books about World War II and 13 books in toto. But maybe you quit after the first one." Then he said, "I used to enjoy watching you on television." Now, at Fox News, all we ask is 24/7, 365. Turn it on, leave it on. That's why I've got a job. So everywhere I go, I tell people, turn it on, leave it on. Apparently, he was referring to me in past tense. I used to watch you on television. Then he says to me, "Can I have your autograph, Mr. Brokaw?" I'm right now thinking at 2 o'clock in the morning I'm not wearing enough makeup. At least he didn't call me Brian Williams. And my lovely wife Betsy of 47 years, we just celebrated her 47th on the 13th. Was that yesterday? 2 days ago. Friday. 47. I don't have much to commend me as husband and father, except the word semper fidelis. They actually mean something to me. She says that I'm a bit of a smart aleck. Actually, the word begins with A, but it's not Alec. And so I take out of my pocket for this gentleman who's just asked for my autograph, one of what we call an autograph card. This is a Fox autograph card. For those of you up front, it says War Stories with Oliver North, and there's a Fox News logo on it. But on the back of the card is blank. And I said, "An autograph? Yes, sir. To whom shall I make this?" He said, "Make it out to Phil." So I take out my pen, and on the back of the card, I write, "Phil, all the best, Tom." him the card, he looks at it, and now with a tear running down his cheek, he says, "I'm the only happy person at this airport tonight." Exactly. So I ask you here in Lehigh Valley, what is the right, the moral, the proper thing to do at this point?
Get the hell out of there.
Bobby Scott, I did nothing, I left. Finally got on a flight, went home. When I got home, I told Betsy what I done. And she said, "You are such a jerk." He's going to get home, he's going to take the card out of his pocket and show it to his wife, and then he's going to see the back of the card. And he's going to say to himself, "The hell is Tom Brokaw using Ollie North's cards for?" I've actually told this story on air, hoping I can apologize at some point for leading him on. I truly do have the best beat in television. Sean Hannity thinks he does, but I've got it. Because my only beat is soldiers, sailors, airmen, guardsmen, Marines, and first responders. The last 14 years, Fox has given me the privilege of keeping company with heroes. Now, I say the word hero knowing that I've got some young people right here in front of me. And I know that the word hero is very closely associated nowadays with someone wearing a spandex suit and a cape. Or it's used in media all the time to describe someone who caught the pass in the end zone.
Caitlyn Jenner.
Or Caitlyn, or whatever her name is. I mean, it's a word that is often misused to describe something that is very straightforward. My heroes do not wear spandex suits and capes. My heroes wear dog tags. They wear flight suits, they wear flak jackets and helmets, and they go to work in some of the most difficult and dangerous places on the planet Earth. The classical definition of the word hero, they should never have taught Marines to read. The classical definition of the word hero is a person who puts themselves at risk for the benefit of another. That certainly defines those that I've covered now for the last 14 years. In 58 embeds, the young Americans who put themselves on the line to save us, to protect us. I'm going to show you some of that tonight, some of those with whom I get to keep company. But it's important to understand the distinction between the way the word really means and the way it's used by many of my colleagues in the media. Last Monday, I returned from Kurdistan and then went to the hospital late that day. I'd gone to the field with another group of heroes, the Peshmerga of Kurdistan. And I'll talk to you more about them in a few moments because it's important we understand that given what's been happening over the course of the last week. Since 9/11/01, the very best and bravest of a generation, 2.5 million young Americans, have gone to war to protect us and offer others the hope of freedom. My job is to let these heroes tell their stories without telling our enemies things they shouldn't know. I want to relate what I do to why we're here this evening, and that's to help heroes. One of my producers at Fox last year asked me, "What are you going to tell your grandkids about why you missed so much of their lives, so many of their birthdays, anniversaries, things that are important over the last 14 years?" And he put together something I could show them for the rest of my life. In less than 2 minutes, this is 58, now 58, then 57 embeds, with the tens of thousands of young soldiers, sailors, airmen, guardsmen, and Marines with whom I've kept company in those difficult and dangerous places, and the things that they do and the way they do. The average age of these youngsters is 20 and a half. They're all at minimum high school graduates. The average education of an enlisted soldier, sailor, airman, and Marine today is 13 and a half years, meaning a year and a half post-high school. They are much more likely to be married today than at any time in the history of our military. Nearly all of them have multiple deployments, none in conditions that one might describe as pleasant. The enemies that our troops face are vicious, brutal, often suicidal, certainly the most inhumane that we've encountered since the Pacific Theater of World War II. They operate and maintain the most sophisticated weapons and equipment. They've been better trained, been taught chemistry and physics, avionics, ballistics, you name it. They can use their weapons like part of their bodies as weapons. They can take a life or save one because they're so remarkably well trained. Their responsibility and accountability exceed that of a CEO of any company in America. Every fourth guy is a leader of 3 others responsible for their lives, their safety, and everything that goes on, and they've got tens of millions of dollars worth of equipment literally within arm's reach. For them, the expression, "I've got your back," is not an ad for a mattress company. They understand what it's really all about. And most importantly, for the very first time since the American Revolution, every single person wearing an American uniform is a volunteer. There's no conscripts, no press gangs, no draft, nothing except that they volunteered to join the service and protect us from the worst that could happen. Instead of praising their perseverance, their skill, and their courage, many in politics and the media tear them down, even though they've all served in harm's way. Though the media coverage of today's fighters isn't as vicious as it was for Vietnam, the potentates of the press still try. I go to college campuses when I'm sent by Fox News to talk about the military and the media. You can say the words Abu Ghraib, and instantly every college student in America will tell you that it was typical of what happened over there, even though it was not. They beat Abu Ghraib like a rented mule for 5 years, making it seem like it was commonplace when it was anything but. I was in Najaf, one of the major cities of Iraq, when a story appeared in Newsweek magazine about a Quran being flushed down a toilet in Gitmo. It was a totally fictitious story. Thousands of people died in the riots that ensued as a consequence of that. Every Friday for 3 weeks, you would have riots and protests and people literally throwing themselves up against the barricades of U.S. compounds, U.S. military bases, and even the embassy in downtown Baghdad. The story was totally fictitious, and Newsweek finally admitted it, but it's still up on the Arab media. Senator, well, he shall remain nameless, Durbin, likened those who served in our military and serve in our military as those who had served Stalin, Hitler, and Pol Pot. Chris Hedges, who is a Pulitzer Prize recipient, a column often appears in both the New York Times and the Washington Compost, wrote the following words, and I wrote them down because I want you to know how wrong it can be. These are nothing but poor kids from Mississippi, Texas, and Alabama, God knows why he picked those places, who couldn't get a decent job or health insurance, so they joined the military because that's all we offered them. That's the assessment of a Pulitzer Prize recipient in America's media. I've got news for you, Mr. Hedges, and all your colleagues. You are dead wrong about those who serve in our military. Dead wrong. The fact is, they came because of this. To this day, I can talk to a young soldier, sailor, airman, Marine out there and ask him why he joined, and he will say because of what happened on 9/11, even though he might have been in elementary school. If they're over the age of 10, every American will remember what happened that day, who they were with, how they learned of it. I asked them, why did you join this particular branch of the service? And they will almost always say, because I had a role model, an uncle, a dad, a cousin, a brother, someone, a coach that they knew who served in that branch of the service, and they looked on that person as a role model. Role models are the most important things we can be to the next generation. That's why we have heroes. Heroes inspire us to go beyond where we are, to some level we might otherwise never achieve. As role models, that's what they are. I've asked them those kinds of questions tens of thousands of times, and it was 58 embeds. How many of you ever raised a teenage boy? Come on, I'm sure. I got away with that for a second. Betsy caught me at an NRA convention asking the question. I put my hand up. She said, "You didn't do that. I did it. You were gone." Well, think about trying to get a teenage boy, to, even an Eagle Scout, to clean his room, clean the whole house, do all the dishes, fix his own meals, fix the meals for everybody else that lives there, go out and spend an 18-hour day with a 75-pound pack on his back, a 45-pound flak jacket, an 8-pound helmet, at 120 degrees, and come back and do the same thing day in and day out. They do it. The kid who once wouldn't share a candy bar with his little brother will now give away his last drop of water to a wounded comrade. They give his only MRE to a hungry Afghan kid, and he'll split his ammo with his mates in a firefight because he knows it will keep them both alive. Today's troops are brighter, better educated, trained, led, and equipped, and more combat experienced than any military force in history. They became the protectors of Muslim women and children in a part of the world where that's a strange thing. when you see something like what you see on the screen, this is not a stage shot. This is a helicopter, the largest helicopter assault of the war that's about to take place in Helmand province, in a place called Marja. It's 70 helicopters in this Silo assault, with Marines and soldiers going into a part of the country no one had been to yet. It's 2011. We've been at war since 2001. So 10 years of letting the Taliban run rampant. And they're getting on the helicopter, and Smitty is the scout dog handler. If you notice on the right-hand side of the screen, there's a dog. It's a Labrador Retriever. He is the bomb dog. He's the first one off the helicopter. And a young Lance Corporal fire team leader notices Smitty is going on that helicopter. Every bird has a bomb dog on it. Why? Because dogs are better than anything else at finding those IEDs. And so you will always, in every bit of footage, you'll always see me right behind the dog. I may be crazy, but I'm not stupid. And these guys notice that Smitty's going on it, the dog's going on it, Dexter's the name of the dog, and they say, hey, let's say a prayer. Not a chaplain, not an officer, not even a non-commissioned officer, a Lance Corporal. I dare the ACLU to tell these government employees to stop preying on government time. Think about it. That's what you've got right here. These young Americans know loyalty, courage, competence, integrity, selflessness, tenacity. They've also got another quality that's irrefutable. This is a shot taken on the 6th of April, 2003. We've been at war now since the 18th of March. The lead element that's going up for Baghdad is the smoke you see in the background. The vehicles are facing around because they've just been attacked by the Republican Guards Regiment. About 250 Marines, about 700 Republican Guardsmen. The UAV had not been up that morning. Nobody saw them, and it's a classic ambush. They spin the vehicles around the road to give themselves a little more offset between the RPGs and 50 caliber machine gun rounds, and the gunners are up on the turrets, and other troops are now running into the gunfight. You can see them on the left side of the screen. In the midst of all this, the United States Navy corpsman, about 6'4", at the time he was a second-class petty officer, now he's a chief. He's a SEAL corpsman out in Coronado. I saw him a few weeks ago out in California. He runs out in the middle of the gunfight and starts picking up wounded Marines and putting battle dressings on and then carrying them to the helicopter that I'm now on the ramp. This is the 4th casualty. The other 3 Marines he brought up, laid on the ramp. The shock trauma team aboard the helicopter puts them in a shock blanket, starts an IV, a blood expander, lays them in a litter, and waits for the next one to show up. Treats them as properly and as good as you possibly could. Unbeknownst to me, and I didn't see it from my helmet cam or the little camera I've got in my hand, on the left-hand side, as you look at it, a Reuters news crew from Australia has run up. And they've now got the camera panning back and forth as this corpsman's been running back and forth with wounded aboard. You notice it's not 4 guys carrying one wounded guy, it's 1 guy carrying a wounded guy. If you look very carefully at the uniform of the wounded fighter, that's not a wounded Marine. That is a wounded Republican Guardsman, an enemy combatant. Those are U.S. military battle dressings. He's been badly wounded. This corpsman has just risked his life to save him. And the corpsman has got him on his back, lays him on the ramp. The crew chief is now yelling, the bird is taking hits, and 50 cal rounds were literally punching right straight through. The skin of a helicopter is about the thickness of a Coke can. You can stick a pencil through a Coke can, so a 50 caliber round goes right on through. And we've got to go. There's about 10 kilometers behind us is a U.S. Army field medical unit that's already set up a hospital. They've jumped those hospitals forward with every unit moved further up the line. There was never one more than 10 kilometers behind us. And he lays that wounded Iraqi soldier on the ramp. They put a shock blanket around him. They start the blood expander. They start an IV. They put him on the rack, and we run off. As we're running back, the helicopter lifts off, and all the gunfire shifts toward the helicopter. And I can hear clearly because the corpsman has my microphone, the wireless microphone jammed up in his flak jacket. And the corpsman, as he's running back, the Reuters news crew shouts out, "Hey mate, what did you do that for? Didn't you notice he was an Iraqi?" In other words, you stupid American. Because, Bobby, this is a polite company, I can only put it this way, he gives them a gesture. And if he hadn't used the expletive, we'd still be using his line on Fox News. He said, "Didn't you notice, bleepers?" He was wounded. That's what we do. We're Americans. You're going to hear those words again tonight. We're Americans. It makes us different than anybody else, even that Australian news team that was part of an Allied media coverage unit. These young Americans are extraordinary. And despite their qualities, like I've just shown you, the unemployment rate for these heroes is nearly double the national average in America for that same age group. How can it be? Well, here's why. The O team, as I call it, has a despicable policy of describing those who serve in our armed forces as victims. They've described them as the victims of Bush's war. They've described them as the victims of failed policy. They've described them as victims of a government or a country that can't find its way in a new world disorder. Well, instead of a program offering tax incentives for employing vets, the left, aided and abetted by the administration, warns of the downside risk of hiring vets. That's why local action, like the project that you started here, 912, is important. I hope the feedback you get encourages you to continue. Let me just talk a little bit about feedback. Now, in the military, feedback is very simple. Is the enemy advancing or retreating? That's the feedback that you're looking for. If it's retreating, it's good. If they're advancing, kill them. And keep killing them until they stop advancing. I mean, the feedback is very simple. In the media, it's different. Media feedback, in our case, often comes in the form of an email. We carry these tiny little BGAN transmitters. It's a satellite transceiver that's not much bigger than a laptop. And we set it up, pointed at the satellite, and we can go live from anywhere in the world. As long as you hit the satellite, you can go live in New York. I had just finished a broadcast with Sean Hannity. I was standing next to the sergeant. You see that about a minute of footage. It takes almost an hour to feed a minute of footage on a BGAN. Shows the sergeant leading an attack. It's very dramatic. I've now got the sergeant next to me. The event, the gunfight had occurred probably an hour before. And I'm up with Hannity, and I make the observation on air that ground combat is the worst experience a human being can have, which I figure is pretty valid. I think I know a little something about it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be wearing this brace today, because that was the North Vietnamese Army in 1968 that did that to me. I just got it fixed. Took a little while. That's because I'm a Marine. This is the feedback I got from that broadcast. Sometimes it's not helpful. Colonel North, correction please. On Hannity tonight, you said ground combat's the worst experience a human can have. This is not true. The worst experience a human can have is spending time with my mother-in-law. My best friend spent 2 years in Iraq, did a tour of duty in Afghanistan. He lost his right hand in Fallujah, and he has met my mother-in-law. I just called him, he agrees with me, says it's not even a close call, Jim in San Diego. That's helpful. Thank you for your feedback. Obviously, Jim in San Diego doesn't get it, but neither does this commander-in-chief or his minions. Despite 6+ years of budget cuts and social engineering, we still have the finest military force the world has ever known. The soldiers, sailors, airmen, guardsmen, and Marines that I cover, and their families, have made extraordinary sacrifices for us. They deserve better than a commander-in-chief garbed as a Nobel laureate, trotting around the world, kowtowing to foreign leaders, and apologizing for America. We need to hire a commander-in-chief who knows that America, the greatest force for good the world has ever known, has nothing for which we need to apologize, ever. Our government's most important purpose is to protect our homeland and the American people. Yet, as our supposed leaders in Washington continue to fail in their primary mission, our vulnerability increases by the day. The graphic images of Americans, civilians, being brutally tortured and murdered by ISIS are still being broadcast around the world. Our head of state promises that, quote, these criminals who perpetrate these atrocities will be brought to justice, unquote. But nothing is done. Here at home, law officers, military personnel, and their dependents are targeted for murder by ISIS in their hometowns with their addresses published on the internet. On July 16th, Muhammad Yusuf Abdulaziz murdered 4 Marines and a Navy sailor in Chattanooga, Tennessee. In the last 2 weeks, ISIS has blown up a Russian airliner, killing 224. and 8 suicide terrorists attacked in Paris, killing over 130. In the midst of this, the President of the United States described ISIS as, quote, contained. In the aftermath of these events, he called today for further action along the same lines we pursued for 2 years, and refused to even name our adversary. Instead, he issues more hollow promises to stop lone wolf extremists and high-fives the drone strike that killed Jihadi John, as if that really made a difference. It didn't. The only force to ever defeat ISIS repeatedly and without fail on the battlefield since ISIS came to be 3 years ago is the Kurdish Peshmerga. I want to just show you a little bit of what the Peshmerga do. First is a video, all right, video? First is a video shot on the mountaintop as they were moving troops into position for the attack that they launched on Sunday. This is the top of Singar Mountain. The town below, this is, by the way, the regimental commander that's going to lead the attack, that led the attack on Sunday. He's giving instructions on where to position these tanks. That is a T-55 tank that is almost as old as I am. The United States didn't give that to them. The Baghdad regime didn't give it to them. They captured it from ISIS. One of the troops that's manning that gun has no leg. He's missing his leg above the knee. And I said on the air, I hope that there's someone in America that can find a way to make sure he gets a prosthetic limb. These weapons are old, they're ancient. Not one of them came from the United States. Not one of the weapons that they carry, the ammunition that they've got, what little there is, came from us. It's all captured from ISIS. You see them right now, that's an airstrike. That airstrike was flown by a French aircraft. The French aircraft did it after the ISIS forward observer, calling repeatedly to fire on the mountaintop because he'd seen our 3 vehicles moving up there, called repeatedly for a mortar fire on top of the mountain. And he got, as a consequence of his radio calls, a 2,000-pound bomb dropped by a French airplane. I asked the ISIS commander, how did you know that that was a French, this is the second strike. How'd you know that that was a French airplane? He says, it was an American airplane, he'd still be flying around waiting for clearance from Washington. Yeah. The French, the Germans, and the British cleared their airstrikes from the cockpit. Tells you a little something, doesn't it? When you look at these guys moving into position in the middle of the night, you realize they're about to take on an enemy that's much better armed than they are, and their enemy is also all volunteer. Remember this, ISIS today numbers something in the neighborhood of 25 to 50,000. Nobody has a perfect fit on. They estimate that somewhere between 15 and 20,000 of them are Westerners who joined them because they wanted to fight with ISIS. When you see this is a captain in the Peshmerga. He's been fighting ISIS now almost alone. Just flip right on through. If you would. They've been fighting almost alone with no help from us. They have no medical support. In the mortar barrage that followed, the Peshmerga fighter behind me lost the bottom of his foot. He was 6 hours from the nearest hospital in the back of a pickup truck. We haven't even given them ambulances, Band-Aids, nothing. And you look at the smiles, they say, we're going to go out, we're going to kill ISIS. The only way to deal with ISIS for them is to go out and kill them. And they understand that. How can it be? By the way, that vehicle was captured the day before I got there. You notice it's still painted black. They haven't got enough tan paint to paint it with their colors. That's the Peshmerga flag of Kurdistan. And of course, Baghdad provides nothing. The government in Washington says, we've provided help to them. Don't believe it. I've seen it with my own eyes. This is what happens to a village that's taken by ISIS. They literally blow the houses down on top of the occupants. That vehicle had a suicide bomber go off underneath it. And we watched everybody get out of the vehicle and find pieces of the dead ISIS volunteer. The Peshmerga are all volunteers. American troops are all volunteers. And yet you don't find the government of the United States doing a thing to support them. This is the second largest refugee camp in the country, 350 some odd thousand people. And they're hoping that they get enough German, British, and French airplanes to fly support for them. They'll actually be able to retake not just the city of Singar, but push all the way back to the Syrian border. And that's the kind of folks we've got who are our allies, and they still won't say a bad thing about America. They refer to it as the US-led coalition. Well, I don't know where the US is leading from since France declared war on ISIS today, and we declared we're going to keep doing what we've been doing. It is somewhat stunning to see what's happening out there. It's good to see organizations like Samaritan's Purse, helping the kids. I would point out to you, do you see any winter clothing on anyone? The temperature that night was 30 degrees on that mountaintop. There's little kids out there like this one with bare feet. There's absolutely no UN aid getting to them other than the tents that were delivered a year ago. And now they're hoping for enough plastic to cover the roofs so that they got something to ward off what promises to be a lot of snow. That was a hospital. ISIS destroyed it from the inside out. And that's the kind of ally that we've got, and yet we're doing absolutely nothing to help them. Our enemies aren't just criminals, as the Obama administration has pointed out. They're not just extremists. Our enemies are radical Islamic jihadis. They use trade names like Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Al-Shabaab, Jama'at Islamiyah, Abu Sayyaf, Hezbollah, Hamas, and a host of other titles. Some are Sunni, some are Shiite, some derive support from Arab entities, others from Persians. But no matter the sobriquet, they are one in their objective: to destroy the United States of America and our closest ally, Israel. For more than 6 years, the Obama White House and State Department have coddled radical Islamists. They did so for so long that Vladimir Putin placed a combined arms brigade in Syria to save their ally, Assad, and he did so in 72 hours. We heard yesterday that our president still intends to close Gitmo. We already know he's released scores of violent jihadi terrorists from detention, and he's got 10 more waiting to go. He's now increased our jeopardy with his ill-conceived nuclear weapons deal with Tehran's vicious ayatollahs. Instead of exploiting the gains made by American soldiers, sailors, airmen, guardsmen, and Marines, the administration has squandered blood and treasure expended in liberating Afghanistan and Iraq. I don't think that they understand the meaning of the word that brought me here tonight, and that's commitment. Commitment is what you're all about. Commitment is what those youngsters I cover are all about. Let me just show you a meaning of the word commitment. This is Captain Matt Lampert, a United States Marine captain, on his second combat tour shot last summer in Afghanistan.
Captain Matt Lampert, this is my second combat going to Afghanistan. I just wish American people would understand there's a lot of people here that still believe in what we're doing out here, and are willing to come back again and again to prove that point.
We didn't air that on Fox News because one of the producers determined that that was too graphic. The O-Team's abysmal record of appeasement has emboldened our enemies, endangered our allies, and increased the risk to the American people. In the aftermath of the Paris attacks, ISIS issued a proclamation saying that the next target is Washington, D.C., the American people. The Obama-Clinton-Kerry legacy is genocide in the Middle East, where ancient Christians and Yazidi communities are literally being obliterated in a genocide that rivals that of Rwanda in the Clinton administration. Over 250,000 unarmed men, women, and children have already perished. Radical Islamists have driven 14 million human beings from their homes in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Lebanon, Somalia, Ethiopia, Kenya, Nigeria, and Mali. The catastrophic numbers of dead and displaced, the largest since World War II, has overwhelmed the United Nations and the NGOs trying to help them. Over $4 billion in U.S. aid and the help of scores of NGOs and relief organizations have proven grossly inadequate. The troops I've covered for the last 14 years in this long fight are stunned by this outcome, and they rightly attribute all of it to this president's failure of nerve. These young Americans that I've covered raised their right hands to fight radical Islamic terror. They deserve to have a commander-in-chief as courageous as they are. They volunteered to fight an enemy Obama won't name, and many gave limbs and lives to win ground that he has surrendered. No previous generation, none of us who served in the military before, have ever been sent into harm's way by political leaders so unwilling to define our enemy or what matters most, victory. These brave patriots that you've seen on the screen have a deeper understanding of America's place and purpose in the world than Washington's political elites and their media enablers. And someday soon, in places Americans liberated and Obama abandoned, like Fallujah and Ramadi and Mosul. Tomorrow's warriors may have to fill their brothers' bloody boots. These are my heroes. They're willing to fight. They don't want to die, but they would for each other and for our freedom. And I stand before you tonight demanding that we have a commander-in-chief worthy of such sacrifice. We, the people, owe it to those who serve in our nation's uniform to hire a new commander-in-chief dedicated to the defense of liberty at home and abroad. Between now and November 8th, 2016, we, the people, need to ask every candidate for federal office, regardless of what that office is, what they would do to protect this nation. We, the people, need to elect those who are committed to overcoming America's leadership deficit disorder and the O-Team's utopian rush to unilateral disarmament. Our leaders should be trusted by our allies, respected or feared by our adversaries. The Commander-in-Chief of our armed forces ought to know the purpose of a strong military. That is very clear. Ronald Reagan knew it, spoke of it often. It's to deter war and win one if we have to fight it. And I'm here tonight to tell you that I've got skin in the game. I've got 16 and a half grandchildren. I do not want them to have to grow up knowing that they are at risk every day from the likes of what we saw happen in Paris over the weekend. If we fail to care for those and their families who have served our country valorously, we are not going to be able to recruit sufficient numbers of high-quality volunteers to fill the ranks the next time we have to fight. The president I was blessed to serve knew that. He raised our pay, he raised morale, and our ability to accomplish the mission. We went from a 200 ship to almost 600 during his tenure because he knew the Navy had to be able to get to where the fight was going to be. He told us that we have a rendezvous with destiny, and he challenged us to ensure the government of, by, and for the people, Abraham Lincoln's words, that government would not perish from the earth. He understood those who served, the sacrifices they made, and what their service means. And he inspired me to start Freedom Alliance. He inspires me every time I go out to the battle and see these troops fighting, because they understand it as well. I want to leave you with the thoughts of the president I had a chance to serve. For 4 minutes, a speech that I actually wrote for him in 1984, and threw it off the table and wrote his own. If you'll watch carefully, he is not reading from a teleprompter. He's reading his own handwritten notes on Veterans Day, 1984. Freedom Alliance put together and licensed his footage so that you can see what a real president and a real commander-in-chief thinks of those of us who serve.
If we look to the answer as to why for so many years we achieved so much, prospered as no other people on earth, it was because here in this land we unleashed the energy and individual genius of man to a greater extent than has ever been done before. Freedom and the dignity of the individual have been more available and assured here than in any other place on earth. The price for this freedom at times has been high, but we have never been unwilling to pay that price. Those who say that we're in a time when there are no heroes, they just don't know where to look. The sloping hills of Arlington National Cemetery, with its row upon row of simple white markers bearing crosses or stars of David, they add up to only a tiny fraction of the price that has been paid for our freedom. Each one of those markers is a monument to the kind of hero I spoke of earlier. Their lives ended in places called Belleau Wood, the Argonne, Omaha Beach, Salerno, and halfway around the world on Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Pork Chop Hill, the Chosin Reservoir, and in 100 rice paddies and jungles of a place called Vietnam. Under one such marker lies a young man, Martin Treptow, who left his job in a small-town barber shop in 1917 to go to France with the famed Rainbow Division. There on the Western Front, he was killed trying to carry a message between battalions under heavy artillery fire. We're told that on his body was found a diary. On the flyleaf, under the heading, "My Pledge," he had written these words: "America must win this war. Therefore I will work, I will save, I will sacrifice, I will endure. I will fight cheerfully and do my utmost as if the issue of the whole struggle depended on me alone." We must realize that no arsenal or no weapon in the arsenals of the world is so formidable as the will and moral courage of free men and women. It is a weapon our adversaries in today's world do not have. It is a weapon that we as Americans do have. Let that be understood by those who practice terrorism and prey upon their neighbors. As for the enemies of freedom, those who are potential adversaries, they will be reminded that peace is the highest aspiration of the American people. We will negotiate for it, sacrifice for it. We will not surrender for it now or ever. We are Americans.
Told you you'd hear those words again. And just leave you with a thought. We don't need to land the 3rd Marine Division. We don't need the 82nd Airborne Division to go back in. We need common sense at the pinnacle of our nation's decision-making process, the National Command Authority. I'm hopeful that the new chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is a friend and a real warfighter who managed to get that through the Pentagon. I'm hopeful that on November 8th next year, we, the people, will do the right thing by hiring a commander-in-chief who understands, as all the Marines do, the words Semper Fidelis aren't just a slogan for U.S. Marines, but always faithful is a way of life. God bless you, and thank you for having me here tonight.
Thank you very much, Colonel North. It's been an honor. If someone told me when I was younger that someday I'd follow Colonel Oliver North on the microphone, I would have just laughed at him. I want to thank you all for coming. There's going to be a book signing. If you didn't bring a book, you can buy one. I'm going to ask that you remain orderly. Franklin is going to meet you in the back, line up in a single file line, starting from where the books are and moving over to my left side of the room. And he'll ask you to take a shot of sanitizer, and then you can take the books and have Colonel North sign them. And then just file right around this way and out the doors. Thank you very much, folks. I really appreciate you all coming and your sponsorship of this event.